Good afternoon, Ram fam, and welcome to Faculty Spotlight. You're going to notice I'm not your normal host, Cynthia. I'm Zackery Carlock, director here at Ram Radio, standing in for Cynthia today. And we want to wish Cynthia good luck with everything she's having to deal with today, with things going on outside of ASU. We've got a great show today. We have a very special guest today, and I'm going to introduce him, Dr. Tony Bartl. Dr. Bartl, Professor Bartl, how are you today?
Doing very well, Zach. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so we're gonna just jump right into this because we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. You are in the political science department, and we were talking off air. Excuse me. You kind of wear a lot of hats over there in the political science department.
Yeah, well,
what all do you do over there?
Well, I teach classes, of course. And,
okay.
But I'm also the pre-law advisor there.
Yeah.
I was hired 15 years ago now to come in
Wow.
and teach courses in constitutional law and on the
Okay.
courts, and also be the guy that helps steer people in the right direction if they want to go to law school.
Yeah, that's a big undertaking, law school. I've had several students that I taught at Snyder that are getting to that phase of they're graduating college right now and looking at where they want to go to law school because they want to. Coincidentally, both of them want to do environmental law. Okay.
How about that?
How about that? And one of them's doing like environmental sciences right now up in Missouri somewhere, and the other one's at UT. Been very fortunate and blessed with some great students. Now, you're in the political science department. Explain to us what exactly is political science.
Well, political science is the subject of debate, even within political scientists.
Okay, fair enough.
Some people will tell you it's all about power, right? Well, that's something that Machiavelli would agree with, right?
Okay.
How to get and wield power.
Sure.
But others would say it's about the big questions about who we are as human
Sure.
beings,
Sure.
and how we're supposed to live together, and
Right.
therefore what kind of governing institutions, what kind of constitution we should have.
Right. Right. And, when we teach debate, a lot of the things we would talk about would be constitutional, especially when we're talking policy debate, because we're making law in policy debate, plans and stuff like that. And a lot of the functionality would come down to constitutionality of our laws and things like that. And I learned real quick that some students, if they haven't taken courses, don't know what's in the Constitution yet. I mean, they know some basic stuff. I got the freedom to speech. They would always tell me that one,
Yeah.
but they don't understand that, First Amendment's more than just the freedom of speech. There's so much more to it in the First Amendment. So I always found it interesting what students do and don't know sometimes until you don't know what you don't know.
That's right, and that's an interesting example because almost every kid knows that already, right?
Right.
I remember the loudmouth kid down the block. His name was Chuck Block,
Oh, no.
and whenever he'd be mouthing off, he'd say, "Freedom of speech."
Yeah.
as his protection. So you know what you have the freedom of in a sense.
Yeah.
But it's not very well known what that freedom is for. So that's
Right.
one of the things that we talk about in my classes on the Constitution. Is
I love that.
We remind people that our freedom to speak is because we have the freedom to reason and discourse together.
Sure.
We live in a government where we're in charge.
Yeah.
So we have to be able to talk to
That's
each
a
other.
democracy for you.
Yeah.
So you said you've been here at Angelo State 15 years.
Yes.
How did you come to Angelo State?
Well, I'm originally from Chicago.
Wow.
So it's
okay.
far away.
Yeah.
I got to Chicago because I wanted to go study at Baylor University
Okay.
with a husband and wife who had just started a graduate program there. Their names are Mary and David Nichols.
Okay.
And Mary Nichols was one of the professors of political philosophy there, an Aristotle specialist, amongst other things. And her husband was an Americanist, a constitutionalist.
Okay.
Well, I was very interested and still am interested in both, but where I really thought I could make a contribution was in the study of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And so I studied with David very closely, and he ended up directing my dissertation.
Wow.
And when I was just about done, still working on it, in fact, the job at Angelo State came open, and I applied, and I've been here ever since.
How do you like San Angelo?
I love San Angelo.
It's a different town, isn't it?
It is.
And I tell people when I talk about my background, I've been all around the world. I've been on all 7 continents of this earth. I've been blessed to see so many things. San Angelo is just different. There's something about it that we love here. And we've only been here a couple years. And on a little side note, I'm going to brag on my wife a little bit, if you don't mind.
I do not mind.
My wife just graduated from Baylor in December with her doctorate in nursing practice.
Excellent.
So we had to go out to Waco to go to graduation in December. And it was only the college. I mean, it was so funny because it was only the College of Health and Science, their nurses and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was the December graduation. And it was like,
packed.
Yes. That arena was so full. I mean, it was probably twice the size of our normal spring graduations here. And I was like, that is so many students. But the campus out at Baylor was beautiful. We really enjoyed it, getting to see a lot of that stuff. Now, you mentioned Dr. Nichols, and we're going to talk about him in a little bit. Not quite yet, but we're going to talk about him a little bit because you did a little something to honor him, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and we're going to get to that here in just a second. So you mentioned you like ASU. What do you think is the biggest thing you've brought to ASU to really help the students here at ASU that you feel like you were just like, I did that?
Oh, well, I think that, understandably,
sure,
an institution like this is and the students here are very interested in what kind of job am I going to get.
Sure.
And that's a big focus of everything we do here.
Absolutely.
But when you're doing that, sometimes it's easy to lose sight of what education is.
Yeah.
And so what I emphasize with my students is that what you do in this 4 years here is shaping yourself for who you are. That's what education is.
Oh, I love that.
It's the student participation in a process of growth to be a fuller human being, and a more responsible citizen.
Yeah, I love that.
Of course, that's directly connected with political science.
Sure,
the citizenship part.
Sure. So, I don't know if you know who John Maxwell is. But
I know many John Maxwells.
I'm a part of the Maxwell leadership team,
okay.
And one of the things John Maxwell always tells us when he's doing his mentoring sessions is, when we stop growing, we start dying. Right, and I'm kind of the same way. What you're saying, when students come to me, in comm, there's so many career fields we can talk about in the communication realm under the communication umbrella, and they're like, I don't know what to do, and I'm like, well, before you do anything, keep growing yourself, because when you stop growing, you start dying, and no one wants to die, but you keep growing. And that, so I love that college is a time to grow and as well as learn. Now, you mentioned being over the legal law school. I was like, I couldn't even think of what I was trying to say. Pre-law. There we go. What all does that entail for you here at ASU?
Well, that very much fits in with my last answer, which is we do study a lot about the mechanics of the courts. We study the case law, particularly the case law related to constitutional questions. But I sometimes tell my students, Karate Kid, right?
Oh, yeah.
How did he learn? Yeah. How was he learning karate? Well, he was out painting the fence and waxing the car. Sometimes he didn't see the connection, right? And it wasn't until the end that he saw how those movements related to the goal. And the way that translates to the advice I give, the advising that I give the pre-law students is they're learning how to read, how to think, how to write. They're not always doing it in a narrow law-related way, and so that's really what law school is for. So you don't need to come to Angelo State to do law school before you do law school, right?
Yeah.
What you need to do is come to lay the groundwork of a good education, and the goal of that education is that even if you don't go to law school, you've come out better.
Yes.
You've had the best education
You got
possible.
something out of it. Yeah.
You're going to be a leader in your community. You're going to be capable of responsible citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be a thoughtful human being.
Okay. So kind of a weird side question to that. And and I'm going to tell you why I asked this question. My wife's a nurse, doesn't ever watch a show about doctors or nurses. She just refuses to watch them.
Mm-hmm.
Do you watch like court procedurals or like
Law and Order?
Stuff? Okay.
The original one.
How
There's
close
no
is that?
substitute.
How close is that to an actual courtroom?
Well,
Other than the obvious,
You know-
Hollywood dramatizing.
to be fully honest, I'm not the best person to ask.
Oh, that's fair.
I'm
That's
a
fair.
political scientist
Sure.
who specializes in the courts and the Constitution.
Sure.
But I am not a legal proceduralist. I've never been to law school.
I understand.
And but I understand that it's fairly close.
Okay.
Yeah.
I several years ago, you remember we had the big snow here. Well, like the week before
Yep.
that big old snow we had.
Snowpocalypse.
Snowpocalypse, that's it. About a week before that snowpocalypse, I got jury summons. I was living in Abilene at the time, and actually had to serve on a jury. And I'd never even been in a courtroom before that. So seeing the process of the we ended up being on jury for like 4 days, and but seeing the whole process play out, I was like, this doesn't look like any TV show I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It looks so different, There wasn't someone yelling in the corner, objection, I think there was like 2 objections in the whole trial. It just seemed so different to me. And so I was like,
Yeah.
I'd be curious, how similar is it really to an actual courtroom?
Well, and the other reason I may not be the best person to ask about this is because you get into the voir dire. You know what that is? When
Yes.
the jury pool, and they start asking people what they do for a living. How do you spend your days? And you tell them I'm a professor of constitutional law. Well,
Bye.
yeah, usually you get cut. And funny thing is the last time this happened to me, and I was not under the impression that this is why I got cut. But the last time I was in voir dire a few years ago, I was sitting in there. The assistant DA was asking questions, and that assistant DA was one of my former students. And
Oh,
I was-
gosh.
So, yes. And
Yeah, a little bit of a conflict of interest there. Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, would you believe that debate coach did not get me dismissed? They were like, no, you're good.
good.
So yeah, that was
Things
the only
may
time.
be changing on that score.
Well, I wish they'd have changed it then. I really didn't want to serve on that jury. I had to drive home in the snow. It was terrible. But I mean, I enjoyed it. It was real neat to see that whole process played out. And it was kind of a strange situation when I was there. It was the defendant was on trial for third offense DUI felony.
Oh.
And so we get seated and they dismiss everybody and the judge gives us the instructions and he dismisses us for lunch. And we come back from lunch and he goes, the defendant has pleaded guilty and would like you to decide his fate.
Oh.
So the trial was literally a sentencing trial.
That's interesting.
It really was, because I didn't even know that was a thing. And we did. We had to set his sentence, and we could give him like up to 10 years in prison, or anywhere from 10 years in prison to 2 years of 2 to 10 years of probation, and anywhere from 1 to 10 years in prison.
Yeah. Now let me turn the tables on you a little bit and ask you: Did you learn a lot through that process?
I really did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really did. Like I didn't know how the jury foreman got set, right? And it seems like such a simple thing, but like literally we were in there and the guy goes, I mean, I guess I can do it. And they went, well, you're number 1. And he goes, okay. And so everybody voted and went 1, you're the jury foreman. And when we were in deliberations to decide, because deliberations wasn't over guilt or innocence, of course. Like I'm paying attention in the trial, and when we get into deliberations, there are people that are saying things and I'm like, I remember thinking, how did you take that from what was said, And on the flip side of that, there were some things that occurred that kind of everybody in the jury noticed. Like one of the things that had occurred was the DA kept I think it was assistant DA there in the county up there. He kept pressing that he wanted prison time, but he was real rude to the defendant when the defendant was on the stand.
Oh.
Like he was having that aspect of, I know you're guilty and I'm going to treat you as a felon. I mean, and sure, he is a felon now. He's already pleaded guilty. But like, he treated him like a felon, not as a human. And
not as a fellow citizen.
Yeah, and the entire jury felt it. Like, it was just, you could see it. And we ended up giving him a set time of probation instead of prison. And because of that, like, we felt like the DA was so unfair to him, because he kept trying to paint him as if he wasn't taking responsibility for his actions. And the whole jury's like, he pled guilty.
Yeah.
He knows what he's, he knows. And so it was real interesting to see that, like, and when we got, like, the DA asked us why, because I guess they can have that chance after to be able to ask the questions. And we flat told him, like, several of us, I did for sure. I said, you didn't treat anyone on that defense team or the defendant like a human. You treated them like, quite frankly, garbage. And I would hope that if I ever get to see you and do a guilty or verdict, that you're a lot better than that. Like, it offended me to say, and I'm not, like, I don't get easily offended. I'm pretty much I call it like I see it kind of guy. And I don't get easily offended by anything. But I was like, I was offended for him because you did not treat him humanistically.
So we've got a perception that our politics is all about, once every 4 years, go into the voting booth, cast your vote for some important election, probably president, maybe
usually,
maybe there's somebody else that you're paying attention to,
right.
But then you go back to your normal life, right?
Yeah.
There was many observers going back quite a ways that said, no, being a citizen and having democratic government is more than that. It can't just be an every 4 years thing.
Right.
And it's the jury process that actually brings people in, teaches them the mechanics of the government, how it actually works.
Yeah.
And this is the most democratic part of our government.
It was eye-opening. Like, for as much of a difference as we may have had, like, we were pretty split, like, between 5 years and 10 years of probation. But we were all set that because of the way the DA treated him, it was going to be probation. The split was on how much probation. And eventually he did get 10 years probation, but and there were some other mitigating factors that eventually led us to that decision. But ultimately the decision between prison or probation was the DA's treatment of him.
I'm going to sneeze.
No, no worries. So yeah, I did. I learned a ton in that process. It was very interesting to me, and the judge was real nice. Like, he pulled out. Do you agree with this decision? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And but you're right. I learned a ton that, just basically as no matter how different we are, there's some things that are just innately we all agree with sometimes. 12 people in a room, there's going to be disagreements. But in the end, we all felt like we made the right decision.
You deliberate together.
Yes.
And I mean, you reason together.
Yeah.
It
was great. And as much as I really did not want to be on a jury, because, you get I got jury duty, you get that feeling, and you go to your boss, boss, I got jury duty, what do I do? Try to get out of it. That's what they say, try to get out of it. Well, I can't. You didn't try hard enough. That's what my boss told me, you didn't try hard enough. I'm like, they gave me a list of reasons. I don't meet any of them.
Yeah.
But, you get that. But when it was all said and done, I really enjoyed it, and I get paid like $20 to do jury duty, something like that.
And doesn't it make you feel better about our political system?
Oh, absolutely.
Your fellow citizens.
It works.
Hey, yeah.
The system works.
That's right.
And I know there are times where, there are, guilt or innocence is mistaken. I know there are mistakes that are sometimes made, and I feel like the problem is when you look at that is those instances that those happen are so small, but they're the ones that are highlighted.
Yep. Yeah.
We don't talk about the 150,000 cases that didn't have a single mistake go through. The guilty party was found guilty. The appropriate sentence was given and all that stuff. It just goes back to that whole the mistakes are what's highlighted sometimes.
Yes, we don't live in a perfect world.
Right. Right. So let's talk about Dr. Nichols. You just published a book.
Yes.
Tom Neary did a big story on you.
Yes, yes.
And tell us about
here's
this.
The book, Constitutionalism and Liberty, Essays in Honor of David Nichols.
Yes.
My teacher, my advisor, my friend, and there are 17 essays plus an introduction in here.
Okay.
And they range across the breadth of David's interests.
Yeah.
Running from focus on the presidency as an institution,
Yeah.
to the founding of our government, the separation of powers, including separation of powers theory, so it then gets into political theory,
Right.
constitutional law, and even more pure political theory in the sense of political philosophy and politics and literature. So this is, it's very unusual to get a political scientist with that range.
Right.
Where and in most fields, we become more and more specialized in the university.
And we're like that in communication.
Yeah. So in communications, you'll know about it.
Yeah. Well,
and a joke with my physicist friends that the theoretical physicists can have a conversation with the applied physicists.
That's funny. And Big Bang Theory always comes to mind when I think about that.
Right.
That's the show I just finished binging, Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. So, what I wanted to do, together with my co-editor Jordan Cash, who studied with David a ways after me, is to get the whole group of people that wrote under David, in addition to a few of his colleagues and longtime friends, and give a tribute to his work.
That is really cool.
His legacy, yeah.
I would be so honored if someone ever did that for me. Of course, I don't know what they'd write, but I might be scared to read some of it. But that is really cool that you're able to do that for, I guess a great word is maybe a mentor for you. That's right.
Yeah.
And I've said it a couple times, it's really cool. And I mean, he was only at Baylor for, a little while, 40 some years, it says here 4 decades. So,
David was not
or in higher education for 4 decades. Yes.
He was in higher ed.
He only
for 4
taught for a little while.
But it was about, I think, 16, 17 years
Even
that he was at Baylor. Yeah.
That's a long time for anybody. Is there any part of the book for you that was like just your favorite part that you got to make sure was in the book?
Well, of course, my own essay.
Can't vote for yourself in that.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
I'm
kidding.
That's right. Nothing like, the opening chapter is from my friend Chris Bissix, and he wrote on Gouverneur Morris's contribution, not just to the Constitution, but to the field of political theory or constitutional theory, dealing with questions about the mixed regime and separation of powers. Ooh. Now, this is some convoluted stuff. But the basic idea is you've got this old idea going back to Aristotle that that all societies divide up into the few and the many, right? And
the segments.
And the few who have less money, less wealth.
More.
The many that have less wealth,
and the few
that have more, right?
Which we see in our society now.
Yeah, the oligarchic elements, the democratic elements.
Absolutely.
And you have this natural division, and it's almost always generates a kind of civil war.
Yeah.
Whether it's a hot civil war or a cold civil war.
Right.
You've got these elements at odds. And Aristotle said what you needed is a mixed regime that had both elements, oligarchic elements and democratic elements, and even monarchic elements as a kind of single person that sort of played the referee.
Right.
And that was the best form of government. Separation.
It's interesting.
Separation of powers. That's a more modern idea, and most people assume that is simply what we have, right? Legislative, executive, judicial, and what Issac said is that Gouverneur Morris's contributions to the Constitution actually melded both of these ideas.
That is really cool because I think when you start looking at that, you look at Aristotle in his day and time, it's kind of a really provoking thought that he had that, and we look at it now and we're like, we're kind of back there now.
Absolutely.
And your battles, I guess you could say, is the whole tax the rich battle. Give them a higher tax bracket or whatever, and things like all these things that are going on with, you look at like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk that are worth 200 and whatever $billion, and then they release their tax returns and they paid like $1,000 in taxes because they don't actually get an income. It's because of the way they structure their businesses, right?
Yeah. And that doesn't even get into the political power that they're able to wield.
Exactly. Yes. And so when you start adding that into that, and you start looking at all the different arguments there, it ends up getting sometimes pretty complicated. Mm-hmm. I think that's the best word I can use is it gets complicated sometimes.
Yeah. And Aristotle would say, well, that's inevitable to a degree in any society, but it's how you manage these elements that matters whether you're going to have a successful society or not.
So that's really cool. So I did not know, though, that the separation of powers is a relatively, I guess, new sort of. Yeah. Of course, new being maybe, 250 years old almost.
Yeah, 200, about that.
Yeah. And we're still having those fights now. Mm-hmm. Like what's can states decide, what's federal government, I think you're seeing that with
what's legislative power, what's executive power,
these different things, and judicial power, and all.
And then we talk about the agencies.
Yes,
what are they?
Right.
Well, Congress creates the agencies, but they're supposed to be part of the executive branch.
Right.
Does that mean that the president can fire them? We are asking.
I didn't even think about that side of it
right now.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That is wow. Now you got me thinking. That's a dangerous thing. You get me thinking. That's a dangerous thing.
Good danger.
No, that is really cool. First of all, I do want to say though, congratulations on this book.
Thank you.
I'm actually going to get me a copy because I like reading stuff like this. My thing is I love biographies, or not biographies, autobiographies. I don't like reading what someone else wrote about somebody. I want to read what they wrote about themselves. Probably my favorite one is about Teddy Roosevelt. Loved his
autobiography.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I lost the word for a moment there.
See, now that's an interesting conversation itself. Good autobiographies, the best ones. Yeah, Roosevelt.
I liked Benjamin Franklin's. Franklin's. I can't remember if his was auto or if it was just a biography.
Oh yeah, it's an autobiography.
I thought so.
Yeah, he wrote it in installments, but it's a major work of literature and of political thought, if rightly understood.
Yeah, I remember reading that going, he's got some, how he never became president. And I know there's a bunch of reasons and all that stuff.
Well, mainly he was too old.
Well, touche. But he had a lot of very interesting point of views in some of his stuff that I really thought, wow, that's really interesting. I like I said, I love Teddy Roosevelt's. There was now for the life of me, I can't think of the name. He wasn't a president, though. And, as soon as we're done with the show, I'll think of it. But there's been a few of them that I've really enjoyed. And I like reading about, processes. And
well, Grant has his memoirs.
Yeah.
Which...
I have not read that one.
Are, long. But worth it. And Ronald Reagan has a very interesting autobiography. In fact, I'm working on a piece that may be interested to some folks over here in this department, communications. Okay. I'm arguing that it's written like Joseph Campbell's Hero's Tale. That's the structure, the literary structure of
interesting.
That. So I think that Reagan had a grasp of these rhetorical devices and techniques. Yeah. That much is obvious from his speeches.
Sure,
he's called a great communicator sometimes.
Yes, he is.
Even in his written autobiography, he's sort of the Luke Skywalker with the absent father. That then has a mentor, and surprisingly enough, that mentor in a way, is FDR, who he's generally seen as being someone who he rejects. So it kind of goes through this interesting cycle.
Yeah, it's like a cycle of life sometimes. No, and in the debate side, we always had the great debaters structure. It was actually a debate that was a national debate, and it was and named in honor of Reagan.
Oh.
Yeah, so I got to have a couple of my kids go compete in that down at UT to make the national circuit. We didn't make it. We came close. We got fourth, but the top two got to make the national circuit and go compete at the national level.
That's terrific.
So, yeah, it was real interesting because the topics they put up are always political topics, and that's where I learned some of my kids know politics really well, and some did not. Some did not at all. Well, that's just about going to wrap us up for today. Now, before we get closed, we got to ask. I got a couple of more questions for you, and these are just kind of favorite questions. Okay. Now we talked about some of the presidents' autobiographies and things. Do you have a favorite president that you really loved?
Washington.
Fair enough. I love that answer.
Yes.
Why?
Well, he was the one who put the stamp on the office.
Yeah. Okay.
The gravitas of his person was able to fix our expectations for that office, and it's really our presidency is the Constitution plus Washington's example, plus everything else that's come since.
Sure.
But these are almost equal parts. Really, the Constitution being the most important. But
sure.
If it was not for him, we wouldn't have a country. He's the father of this country, and
that's fair.
And instituting anything and making it stick is really difficult, and that's what he was able to do.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good. I personally I've always liked. Now I'm younger. I've always liked Reagan personally. He's always been one of my favorites, but I think if I had to go back historically, I would probably say is Washington as well.
Yeah. Reagan's up there. My number 2 sometimes gets me in trouble down here in Texas. Is Abraham Lincoln.
No, I loved Abraham Lincoln. I thought he was great. He was a phenomenal president. You're not in trouble with me.
Of course, most people would agree. These are not controversial picks.
Yeah, no,
Washington and Lincoln.
I think Lincoln's probably my number 3. I think my top 3 are probably Reagan, Washington, and Lincoln, honestly. Mm-hmm. But I grew up in an era watching Reagan and his speeches, and that's kind of how I gravitated a little bit towards the whole debate philosophy and stuff like that.
Oh, great. Then you'll like my chapter because it's on Reagan.
I'm excited. I can't wait. Now, one last question before we get out of here. What's playing on your iPod? We are a radio station. What are you listening to?
Yes. Well, I listen to podcasts.
Okay.
And even in my old age, I still listen to some music. The Constitutionalist podcast.
Okay. I've heard of that one.
Is a good one.
Yeah.
And I was actually the guest on that podcast for the last Constitution Day last year. Where we spoke on the Bill of Rights. But just about weekly, the folks that put it on they're located at Baylor University and funded by the Jack Miller Center. Okay. And they do a great job. Another one is called The New Thinkery, and this is more of a political philosophy.
I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah. One of the co-hosts there is down at the brand new University of Austin, not the University of Texas at Austin, but the University of Austin, where they practice dangerous ideas. Check that out. It's a real hoot.
I'll definitely have to check that out.
As far as music goes, I never pass up an opportunity to promote my favorite singer-songwriter who's still living and active. His name is Chris Knight.
I know the name.
And he's out of Kentucky. But a lot of people mistake him for a Texan. And he actually is an honorary Texan. He comes to Texas and plays a lot.
Fair enough.
Well, check him out.
Well, Dr. Bartl, first of all, let me thank you for coming in today and sitting down and visiting with us. And I've learned that you're not only because this isn't your first book.
No, this is my second.
So, multi-published author now, as well as a podcast star.
Ah, yeah, that's right.
Who knew?
Yes, who knew?
So I just want to thank you for coming in and being our guest today on Faculty Spotlight. As we always say, we want to be able to highlight the great things that our faculty here at Angelo State are doing, not just for the students here, but for the world. And you're doing some amazing things over with pre-law, and I was able to talk to a few students that have talked with you that spoke praises of you. Dr. Rodriguez spoke very highly of you. So glad and honored to have you on the show today to talk about the book, talk about you, and just a little politics.
Well, thank you, Zach.
I appreciate it.
This has been a pleasure, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. So, folks, that's going to wrap us up for today. Cynthia will be back next week. We'll have a completely new guest. One of the deans is going to be on. I don't want to ruin the surprise. I'm going to let her ruin that for you next week. So until then, we'll be back on the same Ram time, same Ram channel, folks. Y'all have a good night.